Hello everyone. I'm creating this short video to give some highlights for our session on the resurrection with some thoughts for your consideration, specifically in terms of the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead and what meaning it holds for us today. What does it mean to you and I? Four goals for today's session, as you can see in your handouts, are first to be able to articulate what the resurrection means for us today. Next, to be able to articulate what the resurrection of Jesus is and is not. Third, to be able to articulate reasons for faith in the resurrection. And lastly, to be able to articulate how the resurrection is a fulfillment of the scriptures. Also in your handouts, I have a couple of nice meditations that I think are really worth reading, especially the one about what heaven might be like. On your handouts, you will find the flow of our session. Our session starts with the Gospel of Mark, when Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, after reaching Jesus' tomb, go away trembling, astonished, afraid of what they encounter. When Mary Magdalene eventually tells the others she has seen the resurrected Jesus, they do not believe her. Some thoughts to reflect upon amongst yourselves, perhaps over lunch or coffee with your colleagues, are these three things. Why might the resurrection perhaps seem irrelevant to people today? Also, think of as many reasons why it is relevant to us or to you today. Why does it matter to you? And what questions or concerns do you have about the resurrection? I highly recommend the Bishop Barron video on the resurrection, which I included in the email which I sent to you that has the attachments for today's session, which will help to answer some of these questions. The video hits on three main points, which again I invite you to ponder and perhaps discuss with someone. These 3 points, based on what St. Paul says about the resurrection: if Christ has not been raised, your faith is in vain. These 3 points are as follows. First, the world is not all there is. How might this truth be helpful to you? One way to consider it is if you know someone who is suffering or who has lost a loved one. The resurrection points to the fact that although life at times can be difficult, there is the hope of heaven. Secondly, Bishop Barron talks about how the tyrant's time is up. Even though one may be oppressed, the cross of Christ gives great hope and an eternal perspective. He explains how tyrants shudder at the cross because, in one aspect, death has no power over us, because it shows us who is the real God. The Romans hung Jesus on the cross, but the resurrection said the Roman oppressors don't have the final say. And thirdly, the way of hope is open to everyone. Christ's outstretched arms beckon all of us, each and every one of us, to the all-loving and merciful arms of the Heavenly Father. So those are some things to ponder. We're going through these pretty quickly here, but very briefly, it's important to highlight what the resurrection is not. So 3 things which the resurrection is not. First, when the Jewish disciples spoke about Jesus' resurrection, they were not claiming that he had just simply been resuscitated. There are 3 accounts in the New Testament where Jesus basically brought someone back to life or just resuscitated them. The first is Jairus' 12-year-old daughter, brought her back to life, the widow's son of Nain, and then Lazarus, he brought him back to life. But all of these would die again. Jesus' resurrection was not like that because he wasn't merely resuscitated and he would not die again. A second thing that it's not, they were not claiming that Jesus' soul or spirit, and you can follow along with these in the flow of the handout I gave you. They were not claiming that Jesus' soul or spirit, which was separated from his body, was alive with God. Okay, the first century Jews believed, and rightly so, which is what we believe, is that at death the soul is separated from the body. Okay, so they weren't just saying his soul kind of went to be with God. No, they actually went around proclaiming the resurrection of Jesus's body. This means that something happened to Jesus's dead body, to his corpse. Something radically, fundamentally different from what was believed to have happened to the bodies of all the other people who ever died. Okay? And the third is that Jesus' followers were not claiming that Jesus was merely exalted to heaven in some vague sort of way. Yeah, sure, after Jesus has died, he went to heaven. A lot of modern day scholars who really don't believe in the actual resurrection hold to this theory. No, what we're saying is that yes, Jesus rose bodily first, and he appeared to many in his glorified body, and then only later did he ascend to heaven. So those are just three things that the resurrection is not. Okay, now to what the resurrection actually is. 3 points here. First, the resurrected Jesus has a body. He is not a ghost. If you recall one of the gospel passages when Jesus stood among them, they were startled because they thought they saw a spirit. And he said, "Why are you troubled? Why do questionings arise in your heart? See my hands and my feet." You've heard these gospels, okay? So the first reaction of the disciples is they were assumed they were seeing a spirit. What does this tell us about their beliefs? Well, one is that perhaps they believed in ghosts, okay? So I've sent you a nice video by Father Mike Schmitz called I Ain't Afraid of No Ghosts. It has a nice take on what the Catholic Church believes about ghosts. So I highly recommend that. So Jesus was not a ghost, okay? And the video on Father Mike Schmitz, I sent that to you in the overall perspective because basically it points to the fact that there is a spiritual world and that there's more than what meets the eye in terms of this physical material world. So I highly recommend you to watch that. Second thing that the resurrection actually is, the resurrected body is the same body that he had while he is alive. He was alive. In the gospel, when doubting Thomas uh, makes his appearance, he says, "Unless I see in his hands the print of the nails, and place my finger in the marks of the nails, and place my hand in his side, I will not believe." This account makes very clear that the risen Jesus had not just discarded his human body like an old garment. The crucifixion has left marks on him forever. Also in your handouts, I've included, which I'd given to you before, some of the aspects of what our glorified bodies are like, okay? So what is Thomas's reaction when confronted with the reality of Jesus's resurrected body? He says, "My Lord and my God." This should be our response. If if you haven't, or whether you have, but if you've encountered the risen Jesus in your life, you can't help but fall on your knees or at least feel a sense of gratitude that, wow, this is my Lord and my God. This should be our response. And third thing about what the resurrection is, Jesus has a transformed body. Although it's the same body, he has new extraordinary qualities. He can walk through walls, veil his presence. He appears how and when he wants. So in short, Jesus' body being raised from the dead does not mean he was restored to earthly life, or that his soul was exalted to heaven after he died in some vague sense. Rather, Jesus has been restored to bodily life and new glorified bodily life, which has something to teach us about what heaven would be like in terms of its physical, being a physical place, which again, one of the meditations I encourage you to read will speak more to that. So this glorified bodily life in eternity is our destiny. We profess it every Sunday in the Creed. I believe in the resurrection of the body. The resurrection of Jesus is truly incredible. But still, some doubt it. The reason I highlight the fact that some doubt it is that I want to demolish the thought of our modern day mindset that people might say, oh, people were just gullible back then. They believed it, some kind of Da Vinci Code theory that was just made up to keep us, ignorant in some false belief. For example, in Mark 16:12-13, it says, "After this he appeared in another form to two of them, as they were walking into the country. And they went back and told the others, but they did not believe them." There are several other accounts of people doubting, but we'll skip those for the sake of time. So let's talk about reasons for belief in the resurrection. Why would they believe in something so incredible? In your handouts, you have the three reasons. The empty tomb. All four gospel accounts attest to this. When the Jewish elders heard about this disappearance of Jesus' body. They did not deny it, but tried to explain it away. They said, "Oh, his disciples stole it in the middle of the night." But the guards were placed there to avoid this very thing. And it's unlikely that they would have fallen asleep because the penalty for failing on guard duty was death for a Roman centurion. And you can find that in Acts of the Apostles, chapter 12. Second, the appearances, reasons for belief. There are 8 different appearances in the Gospels. And I won't belabor those right now for the sake of time. I have a 15-minute time limit on this video. So with the software I'm using, he appeared to them. Okay. Third, it's a fulfillment of the scriptures. And I'll read to you what Jesus himself says about this. It relates to the sign of Jonah from the Old Testament. Then some of the scribes and Pharisees said to him, "Teacher, we wish to see a sign from you." But he answered them, "An evil and adulterous generation seeks for a sign, but no sign shall be given it except the sign of the prophet Jonah. For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the whale, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. The men of Nineveh will arise at the judgment with this generation and condemn it. For they repented at the preaching of Jonah, and behold, something greater than Jonah is here." So, have you ever wondered that really happened? The being swallowed up in the belly of the whale by Jonah? I used to really struggle with that myself, but then I came across the latest and greatest scholarly research. And you may have heard in the news a year or so ago, someone fell off a ship in the Atlantic and they were swallowed by a humpback and they survived it. Well, what the prophecy in Jonah has to say is something a little bit different. I won't read it to you, but it's in your handouts. When Jonah was swallowed up in the belly of the whale, there are 3 things that I highlighted. "Out of the belly of Sheol I cried, and thou didst hear my voice." Later he says, "Yet thou didst bring me up my life from the pit." And the third is, "When my soul fainted within me," in verse 7 of Jonah 2. Then in Jonah 3, he says, "The word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time, saying, Arise, go to Nineveh." Those 3 things, belly of Sheol, the pit, they both refer to terms for the dead, from the realm of the dead in the first century Jewish mindset. That they knew that meant the realm of the dead. And when Jonah says, "My soul fainted within me," this was another way of saying that he actually died. So Jonah's prayer is the last gasp of a dying man. The fish vomited him up on the shore. So in Jonah 3, the word for arise, when he says arise and go to Nineveh, is in the original Hebrew the same word Jesus uses when he raises Jairus' daughter from the dead, when he says Talitha cum, little girl, I say to you, arise. The story of Jonah is about his death and resurrection. It's a prefiguring or a foretelling of Jesus' own resurrection, if you will. So these are just some thoughts on the resurrection. I know, thank you for watching. I know it's hard to watch this, but I just wanted to lay these thoughts out for you to prayerfully consider. Please go back through your handouts, read through them prayerfully. The meditations are real nice, and there are some nice discussion questions that might pique your interest and give you food for further meditation. Have a blessed Lent, and I wish you well. Over and out.